And it's not there to share it on with those guys.
Okay, let's get started. So welcome to our Human Rights Commission meeting here in October. This evening, we have a pretty full agenda. Really large amount of that time is going to be dedicated to reviewing the work plan. So just anyone that's had an opportunity to review that, have that in mind. So going through our current agenda, we'll kick off with our land acknowledgement. So, since time immemorial, the Kalapuya people have been the indigenous stewards to our region, building dynamic communities, maintaining balance with wildlife, and enacting sustainable land practices. A land acknowledgement is a way of resisting the erasure of indigenous histories and to honor Native communities by inviting truth and reconciliation. Following treaties between 1851 and 1855, Kalapuya people were dispossessed of their indigenous homeland by the United States government and forcibly moved to the Coast Reservation in Western Oregon. As we consider the impacts of colonization, we also acknowledge the strength and resiliency of displaced indigenous people. The city of Eugene is built within the traditional homelands known as Kalapuya Liki. Kalapuya descendants are citizens of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, Community of Oregon, and the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians of Oregon. They continue to make contributions in our communities here and across the lands. We express our respect for the inherent political sovereignty of all federally recognized tribal nations and indigenous people who live in the state of Oregon and across the nation. Thanks. So our first item to public order is reviewing our agenda and minutes. So Melissa, you sent out those minutes, and did everyone have an opportunity to review the minutes from our last meeting? Okay.
I did actually notice I had listed Scott Lemons on there, so I will erase that.
Great.
So that needs to be.
Thanks for catching that.
Mhm.
So looking at this evening, if we're okay, we can go ahead and motion to approve those minutes for the record.
Make a motion to approve minutes.
And second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, so moved. So our second piece being looking at our agenda for this evening. So an ad hoc committee met on Wednesday and put together our agenda items. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the agenda this evening? Is there anything missing from that agenda? Okay. So we'll go ahead and move forward with, this evening's, meeting as the, notes are written. And we do have a pretty large section dedicated to our work plan items, so, you'll see that's about 45 minutes is what we have budgeted. So we're hoping that that fosters enough opportunity to really go into some of what we're trying to discuss. So our next agenda item, pulling up. I didn't memorize it before. We're gonna start off with our HRC leadership and commissioner updates. So the HRC leadership and commissioner updates for folks that are new to our commission is just an opportunity to share about any human rights activities or engagement with the community that you've had throughout the past month that you'd like to share or make the Human Rights Commission aware of.
This one we now need to have to be able to close the door.
And so looking at that, does anyone have anything they'd like to share with the Human Rights Commission or with the public attending the meetings? Commissioner Poindexter, floor is yours.
Thank you. I went to Desi Fest. Were you there as well? You were not. And I did not see anyone else from the commission, but I did speak to Mr. Uman to let him know that I was representing the commission. And I just wanted to let you know that I had conversations with a new group called Hindus for Human Rights. And it seems like a group that we should be connected to. They're having a Zoom open house on the 19th of this month at 7 p.m. And Melissa, if you are interested in connecting, I can give you their
Thank you.
address.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. But he was very pleased and touched that we had supported him.
I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other commissioner was Commissioner Dr. Booker.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you did it. He said he didn't see anyone.
I did not, and it was a pretty large crowd.
It's good for them.
They ran out of food. It was a magnificent crowd, so.
Okay.
yeah,
And they were
that-
just offering the food, right?
Right,
I was like, oh, okay.
right.
That's how people are gonna go.
That's good.
I also wanted to put in a footnote that I went to an open house at a new agency called Lavender Network, which you may have read about, that is a collection of queer-focused and health-focused groups in Eugene. And they are hoping to have an opening in November, so watch for that. Because that's another group that we probably need to be closely connected to.
Wonderful. Thank you, Commissioner Poindexter. I think looking at your attendance at Desi Fest, I know there was some significant conversation about caste and interests and our commission understanding and exploring that more.
Yeah.
So that might be some follow-up that we could have with them as well.
That'd be
I
wonderful.
feel like that really falls within scope around protected class statuses and some of the ideas were shared earlier this year.
Mhm.
That's great. Any other commissioner updates? Anything anyone would like to share or highlight? Cool. So one thing that the homelessness and poverty work group will be trying to build relationships with is the University of Oregon. They're planning a interior design studio focused on hostile design. And kind of some students will be interested in exploring different hostile design elements and planning and identifying places within the local context. So that kind of associates with some planning decisions and ways that members of the unhoused community might be interacting with our urban landscape. So we're going to be having a guest speaker at our next homelessness and poverty work group discussing that with us. So this is a really interesting thing. I just want to make sure you all are aware of. So if anyone has particular interest in that, just connect with me. I'll get you informed on that project. So, looking for our leadership updates, and I just wanted to connect, with staff, looking at this agenda. Is this also the space for our quarterly meeting updates? Okay, thank you. So, I'll just go into our quarterly meeting updates. So the Human Rights Commission meets with, the CMO, so the city manager, central services director, and, the mayor on a quarterly basis to just discuss updates, provide, information on commission activities, and receive guidance on various human rights projects that we're working on. So on Friday, Vice Chair Hira and I, met with Mia, Sarah, and Mayor Venus, and discussed, some of the items that we're working on. And there's a couple, items in our work plan that kind of reflect, some of the conversations, so the addition of looking at our strategic goals for the city of Eugene, so that, strategic plan, and a couple elements that came out of that conversation. But we discussed organizational matters, some of our political matters, and, then just basic HRC composition. Some of the primary elements that I think we kind of took away, from that meeting, and we can speak, a little more about this, if anyone has any follow-up questions, but, the idea being that they, are looking into various inquiries that we put in place surrounding personnel matters at, the last HRC meeting. They are, looking at our work plan. We're providing feedback on, some of the different work plan items that we're proposing. So we'll go through those work plan items, this evening, and then that'll go through a review process with the city manager. So we'll be getting some feedback, and that might impact our ability to approve this evening and send it on to council, but we'll kind of talk about that during the work planning session with city staff. One of the city managers, pieces that she will be following up on is reviewing our unsanctioned posting protocol, recommendation that came through the homeless system poverty work group. So she's going to take a thorough look at that and see if there are any aspects of our recommendations that could be integrated. And so, she committed to doing that before our next quarterly meeting so that we can have a more substantive dialogue surrounding that. We discussed some pieces associated with the experience of unsheltered homelessness and some of what the homeless system poverty work group worked on, and why those pieces end up in our work plan this year. We also discussed some of the key themes where, we've really spoken a lot about the discrimination, and the high frequency of hate crimes and bias incidents impacting unhoused populations, Black populations, Asian populations, and the LGBTQIA2+ community, and kind of identified those as key, areas of interest for us, from that perspective of, doing human rights work and providing support assistance. So those are some key demographics that we've identified and talked about as a group. So they know that that's some key demographics that we're thinking about as a commission. When we're looking more broadly, and I did, okay, yeah, I've got it right here. So the city manager, did provide, Thomas and I with copies of the strategic plan. So one of the pieces that I found to be interesting was looking at what aspects of the strategic plan were identified as key community needs. So if anyone hasn't had an opportunity to review this, it's a really important document. And it goes over some of the key, items that are being reviewed by city council and identified as goals for the city of Eugene. As it relates to the Human Rights Commission, there are some of the urgent community needs that intersect with work plan items. So, and I'm just going to kind of show, this is something that we can submit to the record if we need to. But the safe community, community well-being, sustainable and accountable development, accessible, thriving culture, parks and recreation, equitable, effective, accountable municipal government, fair, stable, and adequate financial resources are the key council goals that were identified. When looking at this, there is in the safe community and community well-being, increased response to and decrease incidents of hate and bias crimes. Identified in the safe community for community well-being. That was not coded in, like, if we're looking at the key here, it's listed here, but it's not coded as one of those urgent community needs. So this is something I think we need to talk to our council liaison about. Is just, I think that this commission would probably say that this is something that we want to make sure gets identified in that urgent community need category. And just understand what that codification of these different elements looks like. And what that really, what that means and how we might be able to provide support to make sure that that is identified as a top priority. But looking through, there's a lot of really valuable pieces to this. So I recommend leading up to our next Human Rights Commission meeting that we do take some time with this. There was some significant understanding of their response to homelessness and housing. Sarah spoke a little bit about the long-term projections for housing development and some of the goals that the city is going to have to be working through for housing development. And how that's going to impact different demographics of folks based off their socioeconomic status. So there's probably going to be some room for us to provide some insight on that. So coordinating with Genevieve, who came and spoke with us a little bit about that housing plan, but then also probably connecting and seeing how this builds off of the housing implementation pipeline. And where we can provide input. I think some of our public listening sessions or listening sessions identified by the homeless system probably workers could probably supplement that work. So us kind of be thinking about that, but I think reading through will help us with that goal of the council alignment. Thinking about what are their goals and how do we center our work plan and our efforts around that. So that was a piece on kind of the organizational matters, and then talking to Mayor Venus. Mayor Venus indexed more about the political state of the city and where we are nationally right now, and conveyed some personal narrative about some members of our community that she connected with that really promoted a message of trying not to be divisive and really trying to encourage members of the public to recognize their role in building a cohesive community together. Even in an election year, or whenever times are politically contentious. I think if you're looking at historic trends and something that for folks that have been with the commission and researching this data for a while, you can see an increase of hate and bias incidents in election years. So just really keeping in mind the demographics that may be impacted this fall. And we are in a really contentious political state nationally. So seeing how that manifests on a local level will be important. So that was Mayor Venus's kind of message for us, was just ensuring that we promote keeping cohesion. So we'll be following up on some of the pieces with them related with the work plan, and just really encouraging commissioners, if you have questions, if you have documents or recommendations that you think it's important for the mayor and city manager to review, be really using these quarterly meetings as an opportunity to connect. It's a really unique opportunity to get the time with people who are in charge of government and politically in charge of our city. So just utilize that time as a way to liaison and get those thoughts and ideas through the top officials in city Eugene. So
Wait, quick question. And is the item that you said was identified on the strategic plan but didn't fall under urgent community needs, but to be considered one? Which item?
So safe community for community well-being, the increased response. So this here
Got it.
directly indexes hate and bias incidents, but it wasn't identified as one of those urgent community needs.
Okay, so just a little bit about that. The categories that are included in the strategic plan were based on a number of conversations that council had in combination with city staff. And urgent community needs sort of became the place where things that were important to council but didn't neatly fall into a different category were settled. And so I think that if you were to ask council, the entire strategic plan is of equal importance, and we're trying to advance all of that. Urgent community needs was a little bit of a catch-all category for the things that are really important, but didn't have a home in other components of the strategic plan, so.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Yeah, and I think looking at it, I'm excited that it's on there. You know, I think there's quite a few governments that's not identified by their city council. So I think we're in a space where there is the work of the commission parallels a lot of what's in the strategic plan. And so, I think that clarification is really helpful for us kind of understanding this document. And then knowing to root ourselves in the context of this document, is a really good way to kind of articulate things that are within the scope, even beyond you know, what we're identifying in our work plan. When we're providing a recommendation, we might be able to say, hey, this recommendation is aligned with this subset of community needs that were identified. As being a mechanism for potentially getting more time on the council agenda, or a little more attention from city councilors that we might not understand that, you know, a recommendation is less abstract than what it might come through in a recommendation.
I have a couple of questions. Thank you very much for that. I wonder if any one of us can go to the quarterly meeting, or is that specified for just the chair and coach?
I'm not sure. I think historically it's been the chair and vice chair. Yeah, I don't know if there's any precedents that are established or, you know, opening that up to other commissioners to have that space.
Yeah, each of the boards and commissions have periodic meetings with the mayor and city manager, and it tends to be the chair and vice chair
Okay.
for each of the groups, but I don't think anything precludes, you know, you all to have a different conversation, but,
Oh.
yeah.
All right.
One invitation is about quorum, so cannot be an open invitation, because if three commissioners decide to join, then the chair and vice chair will get at the risk of having a quorum, because the council liaison also joins the meeting.
Yeah.
So there'll have to be something coordinated if one or two commissioners want to join. Let's see how that
Thank you.
goes.
The second question is that strategic plan has already been passed, right? It's in effect. Okay.
And just one more clarification on the plan, because you were showing the chart. And the chart has council outcomes, and of all the council identified outcomes, some of them overlap with the strategic plan. So the coloring that you see are things that council identify as outcomes that the city wants to accomplish, so the columns. And then some of them were selected for the city to focus on through the strategic plan.
Hmm.
So it's the coloring like a temporary thing that the city is working on right now, but all of them are part of the council expected outcomes of the city.
Thank you.
Yeah, so definitely take some time to read through. I think this is worth putting as an agenda item in the future for us to discuss some more detail and start to think about some goals that might align with that. Yeah. But that is all I have on our quarterly meeting. If anyone has any more questions, I'm happy to answer. Outside of that, okay. So our next agenda item is our updates from our EPD liaison report from Lieutenant Williams. So Lieutenant Williams, it's good to see you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Commission. It sounds like you guys have a lot of work to do tonight, so I only actually have three new cases to bring to you. I don't think this is going to take really long. The first case comes from September 29th. In this case, a resident of an apartment complex called the police. He advised the officer that he's gay and lives at the apartment with his boyfriend. His complaint was that when he's in the back of the apartment using the shower, the toilet, that he can hear his neighbors saying disparaging things about his sexuality through the wall, talking about it being gross and offering some slurs. So he told the officer he's got some of these contacts recorded on his phone. The officer said that if he could review those and establish a crime having been committed, that he would he'd go contact the other residents. He reviewed the videos. He received 3, and the content of the video was the victim kind of arguing with his neighbors, and they were denying doing this. So that investigation got assigned to Dean Peterson, but at the outset, at least, it didn't look like there was going to be a provable crime. That's not necessarily the case once it gets looked at a little more closely. So like I said, it's been assigned to one of our special investigations detectives. The next case, I should say, is kind of complicated. So I'm going to try to cut out the parts that don't pertain to the commission without missing anything here. This was a bar fight back on the 5th of October down at the Horsehead. One of our downtown officers was summoned down there for a report of a dispute. A transgender lady was when the officer arrived, there was kind of a scuffle going on with a big group of people. When he told everybody to separate and started sifting through the facts, what he learned was there were kind of two main disputes going on. The one I'm bringing to you is that this transgender lady was using the bathroom, the female's bathroom. Two ladies in the bathroom began criticizing her for using that bathroom, and they began arguing. They argued out into the bar and then out into the parking lot. At some point, it's a little unclear. They began kind of pushing and shoving. There were no injuries. But then security, a boyfriend of one of the ladies tried to kind of get involved, and then the security guard told him to back up, and then there was a scuffle between him and the security guard. And that's where things kind of go in a different direction. But none of that involved our transgender female that was kind of being accosted in this case. Pretty quickly, she made up with the other two ladies, and this dispute turned into a argument over a dropped wallet between two of the males and whose money was whose. And when the officer spoke with our victim, she didn't have any injuries or a desire to prosecute for anything. It seemed like she had actually become friendly with the two ladies and that they had made up. Detective Rick Lowe contacted her following the case assignment, and she confirmed that she was okay and didn't need services. He offered her how to get in touch with the Office of Equity at the City of Eugene, and that was sort of the end of that. The last case I'm bringing to you is a kind of a fisticuffs in the street involving 4 males on 2 different days. So this is up off of Covert Road. This was a resident trying to park in his driveway, taking maybe too long for the guy that was waiting behind him, a landscaper, and kind of a verbal dispute ensued. Everybody gets out of their cars. The two involved get out of their cars. Our victim or complainant in this case said that the landscape guy said he was going to kill him and used a anti-Hispanic slur. They kind of just faced off and it didn't come to a physical altercation. 2 days later, our same victim was at his house and heard his brother arguing with the landscaper. He comes out into the front yard, sees the two of them start to tussle. And so then he intervenes and pushes the first guy down, the one that had challenged him 2 days earlier. Well, that guy had a buddy in the truck. He comes out and they all kind of push and shove a little bit, take some swings at each other. There were no injuries. Officers get out there. Basically what we're able to prove, it's kind of like a disorderly conduct or a physical harassment, but for the comments, the threat and the racially derogatory statement, the bias crime piece. Our suspect denied saying anything like that, and then his friend that was in the truck said that he had been there 2 days earlier, and he never heard him say anything like that, or said he didn't say that. Our victim in that case did have a recording of the altercation, and it either happened before he started the recording or it didn't happen the way he remembered, but the recording didn't show anything like that being said. So at the end of it, the officer explained that everybody potentially faced a charge of disorderly conduct or physical harassment. People were initially insistent on kind of counter allegations, and then ultimately people kind of calmed down and decided they would rather shake hands and forget it. So that case, I don't know if that case has been assigned. My regular investigation sergeant is out today and yesterday, and I didn't see anything in case assignments with that being the most current case. I would kind of doubt that it would be assigned because that officer knows, or the victim knows that he could bring additional evidence forward if anything existed. But if that does get assigned, I'll bring it to the next commission meeting. And that's all I've got, thankfully. Any questions?
Doesn't look like we have any questions for the time being. I'll look forward to hearing some more on the case that you index at the end, just for our understanding of it. But yeah, thank you for the report, Lieutenant Williams.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. It's good seeing you and have a good evening.
Yeah, those are some heavy incidents. The altercation, that's I feel like a really common piece is to have those sentiments shared in the public spaces. So appreciate it. So looking at our next piece on the agenda, we have our hate and bias report from Fabio. So kind of following up our EPD liaison report, we do get updates from the Office of Equity and Community Engagement on their engagement with these situations and other pieces related to hate and bias.
So, thanks, Chair. As you know, for the past 2 years, we are not being the primary entity collecting reports. The reports now go through the state of Oregon bias hotline. We still do get some people who come to our office. There are a few community members who feel more comfortable talking to someone in person, and they come here and our staff talks to them and connects them with resources. But our approach has been to direct them to report the case to DOJ, so we have consistency in the data. And that was the main reason for the city not to have a duplicate reporting system, because we could not control where people were going with that information. And with the Oregon, the state passing that legislation and having a service that is available to everyone in Oregon, it made sense for us to focus our attention on other areas where we could perhaps complement whatever the state was doing. So in that transition, we had to stop preparing the report on hate and bias crimes as we had been doing, because in creating the new system, the state adopted a very different methodology. And I'm going to show you a little bit of what kind of data is available to us now. The main difference is that when we were doing the reporting, it was based on cases. So we get a case and we investigate the case. If 3 or 4 people call us or send us an email reporting something connected to that case, it would all be considered together as one case. Same way that police investigates bias crimes. So when there is an incident, EPG doesn't count every witness or every victim as a separate case. They have one case number and all the information is attached to that case number. So for many years, Eugene was doing the reporting based on number of cases. For the state, they do based on number of reports. So I will show you a little bit of the data and present you a comparison between 2023 and 2024 and show a few outliers that can help you understand why it is still very early for us to make any sort of comparison using the data available through the state hotline. And then I can answer questions. And if you are very interested in digging through the data, we can also make the data set available to you. So I'm going to, I'm sharing the screen and I believe people at home can see it. So this is just the spreadsheet with the data I get from the DOJ. And they have information when the incident happened, when it was reported, what is the protected class of the targeted person. There are some additional subcategories that they can add to the reporting, the type of incident, if it was vandalism, harassment, hate speech, and so on. And then their bias determination, which is staff's understanding of the case. So some cases will be classified as bias incident when there is no criminal activity involved, but there is messaging or something that is offensive to people in different groups. Some cases may be considered bias, but the group is not a protected class. For example, the unhoused would be one of those. We may have a hate crime that is a misdemeanor, a felony, and other classifications. And that's listed in bias determination to show what kind of incident that report is related to. We also have locations. Some cases will share just the city, and in some reports we get the cross streets. And that can help us understand the data when we go into the aggregate numbers for the year. So what I'm going to share now is a summary of the data we have received from the state staff. And that can help you understand where we are in comparison to the previous year. So for example, for 2023 up to September, we had 221 bias incidents reported. In this year, we have 65. Bias crimes were 190 last year. Now we are at 46. Reports for which the criteria wasn't met, they had 25 last year, 9 this year. So what it means here is that they investigated the case, they tried to, not investigate, sorry, they analyzed the case, and they determined that it could not be classified either as a bias incident or as a bias crime. And we did used to get those cases here as well. So someone had a verbal altercation with a neighbor and call us. And they would assume that it was based on something, or we could not figure out what it was about. The words said there was not enough information for us to determine if it was a bias incident or a bias crime. And some other cases, they are unable to determine if it's bias crime or incident just because there's not enough information. Sometimes it's someone who was passing and saw something and called and report, but there wasn't enough information for them to make a determination. So those are a few cases, like 10 in 2023 up to September and 15 this year. At the second part of the table, you can see the groups that were most affected by incidents and crimes last year and this year. And you can see here the Asian community in 2023, 21 cases up to September. Now we're at 4. The Black and African American community, 127. Now we are at 38. Hispanic or Latino, 25 versus 14 now. LGBTQ plus 32 last year, 50 now. And the Jewish community, 162 last year and 26 now. So when you look at the data, it may seem like a very considerable decrease in the number of reports. And then you need to go into case by case to understand why this is happening. And in my meeting with Johanna, she alerted me that you'll see a big decrease in the number of cases. That doesn't mean that has been a big decrease in the incidence of bias and hate crimes in Oregon. It's just that the report is based on number of cases. For example, if you look at some of the notes I made from the spreadsheet from last year, 164 reports targeting the Jewish community. It was a very large number. Most of them were related to the flyers that were distributed in town. So every person who called or sent an email or filed the report online about that case is counted as one incident in that one entry in the spreadsheet. So that's why we get 164. For example, of those 127 targeting the Black and African American community, there are 48 from the same address in the same week. And it was a case that our office was involved. It was a situation involving tenants at a affordable housing unit here, in some case of discrimination against the families. There were multiple family members involved and multiple neighbors. So every person calling generated a report that is calculating the data for the previous year. And we had 15 reports related to gender that all happened at the U of O at the same time. So I'm assuming, because we don't get the description of the case with information that would identify people, but that, for example, could be a case involving a professor who said something in a class that offended several people, or a situation like that, that one person said something and that several people felt offended and they called and reported this. So the data is very tricky for us to understand. We'll need a more, like a longer series to understand what are the trends. Because the system is new, every year it's getting better known. So in the first 3 years of the state system, the numbers were growing very, very fast. That doesn't mean that the incidence is growing in Oregon at the same rate. It's just that more cities were integrating into the system, more counties were establishing connections, and the state system was going beyond being a pilot program with 3 counties to being available in all counties in Oregon and so on. So there were several technical things that would explain why the data was growing at that fast speed in the initial years of the program. And it tends to stabilize. We had the same thing in Eugene. The first years, the growth was very steep because it was new and people were getting to know more. And then over the years, we start seeing trends. As has been mentioned, in election years, we tend to see an increase in cases. So right now, it's an election year and the data is pointing to a very large decrease in the number of reports. So again, that may be because of those outliers that last year made the data considerably higher than what we have been seeing in our city. So that is just some information. If you want to dig more into the data set, we can make the spreadsheets for last year and the partial one for this year available to those who would like to know more about this. Any questions?
Yeah, so I guess I would love to take a look at those spreadsheets if you want to forward those along. One of my thoughts in looking at trends, so from what you expressed is this year that we are in an actual decline of reports, is we don't have the same level of frequency that we had at this same time last year.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you knew any variables that were contributing to that reduction in reports.
The main one are the outliers that we had last year, like 164 cases involving the same community. We have not seen that same kind of flyering happening in Eugene this year, despite what is going on in the Middle East that could be impacting how many people are being affected. The number of reports are not matching what we saw last year because of the flyers.
So I guess, sorry, I'll reframe. I understand that kind of distinction between the 2 years of like those high volume incidents where, but if we looked at it relatively, are we at the 2 sets of data beside each other? Are we seeing an increase or a decrease in bias incidents and hate crimes? Knowing that it's kind of hard to read through the data, but yeah.
The data points to a decrease.
Okay.
Right now. And that's the information I got from the state staff is that the data is pointing to a decrease. And it will require us waiting until the end of the year so we can get the full picture, understand what's going on. The election is approaching, things may pick up. We hope that that's not the case, but there's a potential factor that elections may play a role in how people behave. What we have seen over the years, especially for the crimes, and the crimes is a more reliable data set because it is investigated, is that the tendency has been a decline, like small declines year after year. That's what I have seen in Eugene for the past 8 years. And that can be the result of more investigation, more people being aware that this is serious, that they can end up facing a judge and sentencing for that. So the visibility that we have received for the reports and the investigations in previous years may have had an impact on that as well. And the variation has been very minimal in the reported criminal activity. That's important for us to know. It's always reported. It's not the real activity going on in the community because most people still prefer, based on the data we have available from the crime victimization survey. That's a national survey that is done every few years. And they ask people that if they had been a victim in a crime, if they were willing to report or not, if not, why. So the statistics that about 30 to 40% of the cases are reported, bias crimes. So most people would be victimized and would prefer not to report to police. So that's a constant. And we hear those cases here in our office. People come talk to us and say, I just want you to know this, but there's nothing else I want done with that.
Mhm.
So when we were doing our reporting, those situations would be categorized as a bias incident.
Mhm.
There was a crime involved, but the victim was asking not to report, so we had to lead with the victim's preference.
Commissioner Kabuka?
Hi, I was wondering if there was I know you, Fabio, you just talked about some of the reasons why we might have a reduced number of incidents or reports, but are the people who are reporting, do you know if they're being supported and if they're feeling supportive? Is there a follow-up form or something that they can fill out to see, we or the police can declare it resolved, but that doesn't mean it's resolved for them. And is there a way to follow up on that?
Yes, for the case report direct to Eugene Police, as you heard, information just a few minutes ago, the victims are given a card with our information if they need support, and most people do not contact us. Has been the case throughout the existence of our program. I would say 1 in 10 people would ask for some sort of support.
Mhm.
For the bias incidents, when we were dealing with the cases, because we were face to face with people, we would ask them if they need some support and sometimes connect them with organizations and groups in town. Now they are talking to the state. So that data is not available to us, but we do know that the number of resources the state can offer is more robust than what we could offer here at the city.
Mhm.
So they are offering assistance with relocation. They are offering assistance with security measures like installing a camera or something like that. We did not have any budget for that kind of situation. And the state staff are still connecting people to the victim services available through the district attorney's office in every county. For the city of Eugene, what we have told state staff is that we are still available to get involved in some situations based on what is at our disposal here in the organization, but we are not primary for dealing because now it is a state responsibility to that new law to offer the reporting program and the support to every Oregon resident. But if there is a victim that reports to the state and requires connection with local services, we can still provide some of those referrals.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? So I think my last question would be for commissioners that are maybe new to reviewing trends and diving into these data sets. What are some of the key elements that they should be paying attention to?
I'd say if you look into the spreadsheets, like take a look at the dates of the incidents, because you see, like I mentioned, with that specific address, 48 cases in 1 week. So that would like that got my attention. I said, what is going on here? And then we went to our records. Okay, we were dealing with a specific case in that location that we know involved multiple staff and multiple people at that same housing unit.
Mhm.
So there would be a flag that we may not make conclusions about the number of cases without getting more details. And the data set is very limited in what you can understand from the cases, and that's on purpose to protect people's identities. If you go, for example, to the FBI website on hate crimes, they have a disclaimer: do not use this data for comparison.
Mhm.
And year after year, every time we release our report, there will be something on the news about the horrible situation with hate crimes in Eugene.
Mhm.
And the reason that the FBI says do not compare is because reporting is not required. It is voluntary. So a city like Eugene was reporting everything we had every year, was always being compared to cities that were not reporting. And they would say, we are like the hate crimes capital in the US.
Mhm.
That wasn't the case because people just take the data and make comparisons and make charts when it's not appropriate.
That's very helpful context. So I think for and Commissioner Kabuko, is your hand still up for
Apologies, no, it's not.
Okay. Well, I think looking, as a commission and something that I'd like us to think about as a group is when we take in the information from EPD liaison reports or we're going through the hate and bias data, thinking about what groups are being identified as being impacted and how we start to develop some strategic outreach, ways to connect with these groups that are getting a disproportionate amount of hate and bias incidents occurring. And so I think looking at these data sets more broadly and then thinking about how do we, within our local context, provide support to organizations that might be doing some of the more localized assistance. There are direct service providers and institutions that provide supportive frameworks. So I think as the city moves in this direction, and this is kind of a broader statewide piece, I think what our commission, I'd really like us to explore is how do we make sure that we identify those localized supports? And we can effectively liaison for individuals that are impacted. There's a lot of those localized supports that the Office of Equity and Community Engagement are already connected to. And so I think just really thinking about this and thinking about what is our role in responding and supporting individuals is important. So don't know if there's an action item there, but I do think that there's some key points to be thinking about. And as we read through the work plan, we'll see some of our charters on how we're supposed to interact with this information in the community. So
there is a coalition, local coalition of organizations representing some of those targeted communities, and they meet once a month. It's a coalition against hate crimes. Our office has had representation in those meetings for many years. They started reconvening last year. There was a hiatus because of the pandemic. And as soon as we have someone hired for the human rights liaison position, that person would be our rep in that coalition. So we will have someone going to those meetings, but that's also a group that is open and it's all volunteer run, and the commission can engage with them as well.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely share information on that. See if someone would be interested in pursuing that. Okay, any other questions on this? Okay, so Councilor Leach isn't able to join us, so we can table our council report. Included in the materials that were sent out was the tentative council agenda. And the recommendation from the city manager was to be examining some of the dialogue surrounding homelessness and housing. That's going to be on the council agenda. So anything that you're reviewing here, just take a look if you have interest in it. And we want to connect with Councilor Leach. She's open to us reaching out to her to glean information. So that's really all I have there. And if anyone has any questions or areas of interest identified in the council agenda that you'd like to highlight.
Chair, I just checked the agenda. It's not yet visible to us, but there is a work session coming up that will be addressing the naming policy, and that's related to HRC previous work on naming of places and the sites of memory. So I did update the staff on the draft work plan items that you have in the work plan that relates to those projects. So there may be something that could need collaboration with HRC as the city is moving forward in some of those recommendations. So I will have more information to share later, but right now it's not posted.
Yeah, I think that meeting will occur on Monday, October 28th. It'll be one of the two items at 5:30.
Okay. Yeah, definitely connect with us and wherever we can provide input, we'll be happy to do so. Okay. So, any other questions, comments on council reports, requests for Councilor Leach? Okay. So our next agenda item is a request for support from Catholic Community Services. And it's a discussion about, do you have a representative?
I don't see her on here. Her name is Lori Burrell, I believe, unless any of the other attendees is her. But we do have Akasha here who can talk about the second one, and I can try to reach out to Lori.
Perfect. Okay, so we've got about 10 minutes, so some time for you to kind of speak about your request for support, a little bit about who you are, and then some space for us to ask your questions and learn a little bit more. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, welcome.
Hello, it's good to be here. So, I am a temporary city employee. I've been a temporary city employee since 2007.
Wow.
Yeah, in recreation mostly, and then now I'm in the cultural services. Back in the day, and so I'm here not as a city employee, I'm here as a citizen to clarify that, so I'm not representing those other programs. But there's something that's been really dear to me is Transgender and Gender Diversity Awareness Week and Transgender Day of Remembrance. Back in the day when I was doing a lot of internships and work with Community Alliance of Lane County Calc and PFLAG and all the other gender center and all the other agencies that were available at that time. We came together and formed like a community coalition that had some nonprofits, the University of Oregon LGBT ESSP and their youth led. Now it's Q83 or something like that is the shortened name. And then Lane Community Colleges, Gender and Sexuality Alliance were also involved among some other ones within there. We also solicited from the HRC Commission with Ken that was there at the time and for many years, and it was supported, and the day on November 20th was held at the atrium. And the commissioners were invited to help us read names as we remembered and did a moment of silence for the people who were murdered from anti-trans violent hate crimes. And so my ask, and I don't know where anyone's been since, so you all might already be involved, but my ask was it's coming up on November 20th, so I don't know if this year is probably too soon, but I want it on our radar for discussion. Maybe in the future for hopes of community collaboration, perhaps some of our city programs would like to get involved and put something up for the community. I know last year, cultural services, this is kind of a part of my job, allowed me to kind of have a little memorial thing that I put together. And there was a lot of comments from staff who worked there who really felt seen and belonged. And I know that's a really important value of the city. And so I just wanted to start the conversations and get it. And so that's my request today. And just so we can co-create and collaborate together and maybe get some things going. So, and if you don't know what Transgender Day of Remembrance is, it started when a trans woman of color named Rita Hester was brutally murdered for being a trans woman of color. And one of her advocates, Gwendolyn Ann Smith, did a vigil, and this was in 1998 when she was murdered. And in 1999, the vigil was held. And it became this international November 20th Transgender Day of Remembrance thing where many, many people have their own ceremonies and ways of grieving and celebrating those lives that were lost. And so leading up to that day, there's Gender Diversity Awareness Week to kind of prepare everyone and educate everyone and bring awareness to that. There's also some like transgender visibility days that happen in the spring. And so I really would like to see some of those things and included in with the other groups that are being represented and highlighted and brought attention and awareness to in the city. So that's my ask.
Okay.
Please,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
So I, as multicultural liaison, invited Pasha come join us. And what really spoke to me was how every year the Human Rights Commission does the Unhoused Memorial Day. And I love that it's happens every year. And my understanding is that it's been volunteers been doing Transgender Day of Remembrance all this time and capacity is waning. And so I thought it might be a great suggestion for our group, our office, or Human Rights Commission to help support this moving forward. So I just
I'd like to just offer a little bit of context of HRC's involvement with that event in the past years, especially since I joined the organization. We had received requests for support in the past, and the commission had been involved. Then in a few years, and that event was always a very intimate event. Like there was not an interest in broadcasting it and making it announced publicly, sometimes for safety or just to keep the event protected as a space for people who were grieving those who were lost. Then we had the pandemic that some of those events would not happen. And I believe in the last editions, we were not requested to provide financial support for the event, but we still had some city employees who participated in the preparation of the panels, the materials that were used. And those are still available to us. The employee is now retired, but I believe those materials were left behind that can be used. And that has been a little bit of the history, like some years the commission was asked to support and some other years we did not receive a request for support.
Yeah,
So it depended on who was involved with the planning and how open or more intimate they wanted to keep the event.
I can answer further than some of that history. Between 2009 and 2015 or 16 was when I was involved with the communities, and we did solicit most of those years, the HRC, because we wanted it to really be the whole city involved. The mayor read the proclamation there. We had the governor have a representative one year. So like, this was a symbol, especially at that time, for the community that, hey, like, this is serious. We mean it, and we want our city, to be this way. And our community, when Transponder, another nonprofit group, was coming to raise, we had always wanted to pass this on to a trans organization to kind of continue it. I am unsure where that might have landed and if they had capacity, because funding, all the things, and people power. It really does take a lot of volunteers to really make some things work. But in collaboration with that, in conjunction with that, I wanted something that really said something about the city for us and for the employees that work here who might want to feel like they belong and seen and aware, and offer this other, hey, if this isn't your fit, maybe here is your fit. And if that's capacity, if we have it, and it can look like I'm into co-creating it together, and like, it can be something different than it was. It can be something the community co-working together. I mean, I don't know, there might be some room for exploration.
Well, I think something I want to differentiate is, Akasha's not here asking for financial support,
Right.
asking more for partnership. That's why you don't have a funding request form or anything, but it was more of a collaboration, not a one-time, one-year deal.
Yeah, I want to keep building this momentum and moving forward together.
Are you still waiting to hear from Transponder?
No, I haven't reached out to them or anything like that. Yeah, I'm just coming here as a citizen who, I work in the city, and I'm noticing some things I noticed last year, which I brought up when I put that little thing together to memorialize, and so
Yeah.
how it meant something.
Yes.
And I really was moved by that, and so it's just really not even with Transponder, it's just about what can we do together as the city, and putting that out there together. That you're seeing,
Well, thanks for sharing, and
yeah.
I think, so for the commission, it sounds like we may have a couple commissioners that are interested in providing support. And so if we are looking at that, you said the timeline is November 20.
Yes, and I
So-
totally understand if this year, I mean, it is cutting it,
Yeah,
but this is more like an ask to keep it on your radar, to
Yes.
continue these conversations. So that maybe next year we'll have a little something,
yeah,
who knows what will develop.
that's great.
Yeah.
So maybe, our first step for exploring this request for support would just be coordinating Melissa and sending out, seeing what commissioners would be interested in having an ad hoc committee. Just meet with you, have a meeting, probably somewhere here, and talk about what a couple ideas for this could look like.
Mhm.
And then see if there is something that's doable this year, and then if not, what would that look like? Just putting it on the long-term work plan for the HRC.
Yeah, that's exactly what my ask is, yeah.
Yeah, and then if I may, and I know you're not here as a city employee, but I do think this would be an appropriate topic for the ECC to talk about. Which is our internal network of folks who engage in equity and community engagement work. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping to eventually get on there as an employee.
Yeah,
Like, not as a person. Like my hat.
Great. Well, thank you for going through the history and sharing on it, and for the work you've done to host that space and hold that space in the community. It's really meaningful, and I know there's a lot of Eugenians that are in Eugene because this is a more inclusive community, and there are resources and people just like yourself here that are trying to connect and build spaces of belonging. And so whatever way that we can participate in that, I'd love to have that conversation, so.
Awesome. Thank you so much for hearing me. Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you.
Great.
Right.
Thank you, really good.
Thank you for dinner.
Nice to meet you all.
Sure, just a quick plug, if you have time, there is an exhibit right in the lobby here that occasion the chamber involved in preparing cultural services, so that would be a great opportunity for you to see it, and for people in the community to come and see the exhibit space at City Hall.
Just because Transgender Day of Remembrance is coming up quick, is there any of the commissioners who are very interested in getting involved? So I can. Thank you. And I'll send out an email to everybody too.
Thank you. And it looks like Lori is in our panel, so our second request of support, Catholic Community Services. Lori, it's good to see you.
Good evening, Commission. Lori Peralt with Catholic Community Services.
It's good to see you again. So going through, we have about 10 minutes that were budgeted. So if you want to just provide what you plan to speak about and then give us a little space to ask some questions and follow up. It's good to see you this evening.
Sure. So we've applied to and asked once again to have sponsorship of the Human Rights Commission for our annual fundraising event for our Refugee and Immigrant Services Program, which we call RIF. It is on Thursday, November 14th, 6 o'clock at the Unitarian Universal Church in Eugene. And we'd love to have the whole commission there. It's a community-wide event, open to anyone and everyone. Great information about what is happening on the immigrant and refugee front through our agency. It's an awesome annual event, and we're doing great work expanding, hopefully continue to expand after the election. And we'd love to have you all there joining us.
Thank you. So do any commissioners have any questions for Lori regarding this request for support?
It's $500, is that right?
Mhm. So Lori, I think we had some folks involved last year that attended the event and really enjoyed what you had put together and all the resources and connection that was made available there. So I'm really excited to see you back and to hear that you're putting on that event again. And at UU, that's a great location. So I think one of my questions is what was meaningful about the Human Rights Commission being involved last year and participating in that event? Were there any takeaways?
You know, I love having the city there and the support of the city, and that we have our own supporters that, you know, really love the work that we're doing across the community. But I think it might have been the first time that the city and the Human Rights Commission was actually present and could hear firsthand what's going on this front. We're the only agency doing this work in Lane County. This past year, we applied for and were granted full affiliate refugee resettlement agency by the USCCB. And we had a goal of resettling 50 refugees into the community, and we surpassed that by 10%. So we resettled 55 refugees this past year, and they upped our goal to 75 in the coming year. And we're confident that we'll be able to do that as well. And when I say resettle, I mean everything from, greeting the refugee families at the airport, bringing them to their new housing where they're going to be staying short term, and then finding long-term housing, working with them to gain employment, immigration legal services to get all of their legal documents in place, their work permits, and helping resettle kids into schools, enrolled into healthcare, and journey with them to healthcare appointments. It's a full-on resettlement effort, and we've done a great job of doing that in the last several years, but in particular in the last year when we were a designated full affiliate resettlement agency. So it's really fun, this event, stories, updates, and really in a very short amount of time you can go and really hear about the work that's going on.
Thank you, Lori. Do any commissioners have any questions before we move forward? So do any commissioners have a motion or an amendment to this request of support?
Motion to approve.
To approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any who do not support? Any who abstain? Okay, wonderful.
Sorry, Chair, Commissioner Kabuko, we didn't get your vote.
I vote for.
Thanks, Commissioner Kuko. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you, Lori. We look forward to seeing you again this year.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing all of you there as well. Really appreciate your support.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care.
Take care.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Wonderful. All right, thank you all. For folks that are interested in attending that event, that is coming up within the month. So just make sure that we reach out. Having HRC participation for anything over $200 is a requirement, but it's also just highly beneficial. A lot of folks really benefited from going to that event last year. So if you're interested in that, just shoot staff a message and make sure all the information gets to you. Okay, so looking at our next item on the agenda, we have some space for reviewing our work plan. And before we open up the dialogue, I just wanted to provide space for staff to provide any insight on the approval process or any of the editing or amending process that needs to go into play. And then we'll open up some time to actually review this and provide input before we put it to a vote. So anything that you two would like to add before we get started?
Yes, thank you. We shared a draft of the work plan today that contains some staff corrections to the work plan, and they are noted in track change, so you can see what they are. Some of them were just typos or formatting issues. We have a few notes on items that in our understanding are outside of the scope of the HRC because they relate to other jurisdictions or to things that the HRC is not designated to work on. So there will be some conflict with other city policies and practices, and we can present information of those as we get to them. We have a large number of items. So something that has been helpful in the past is to open the presentation of the draft work plan and consider that if commissioners are not proposing change or requesting additions to that item, the item is approved, tentatively approved without objection. And then we go through each one of them. If there is a request for discussion, one of the items in the commission discuss, comes to an agreement, and then we move forward and then vote on the document as a global item. That has been the process we have used in the past to get through all those items in under 1 hour.
So does that make sense to everyone? Okay, so looking through this evening, going through and just reviewing each of the items, holding space for it. There may be an element of wordsmithing. If we get really into the weeds of it, just trying to find a synopsis for ideas is important. So you all know, as we did have an ad hoc group that went through and worked on this, and we provided some input and thoughts into some of these items. So this has been reviewed a few times. The homelessness and poverty work group reviewed items that are associated with their work. And the goal tonight, I think, really is just that we get a refined iteration of this and talk through any of these pieces for their feedback, or there may be amendments. So. Go.
I might be really naive with this, so sorry.
Mhm.
There are a lot of items on here to do in 1 year. Do we actually do them all, or?
Mhm.
Yeah,
That's a good question. So it's 2 years, and part of it's scope.
okay,
Yeah.
So you'll see some items on here, and there's a couple different approaches to work on. And and there might be different philosophies on this. Having the scope to address things when they come up has been really beneficial for the Human Rights Commission. So if it isn't on the work plan, sometimes it's really hard to say, hey, we'd like to provide insight on this. So the goal is that we are actually actuating or providing, and you'd be amazed how many of these we actually do. Because of having the large volunteer base that we have in the subcommittees. And our partnership with the Office of Equity and Community Engagement. So there's a lot of these that they do happen.
Okay.
There's probably a percentage of these that they're items that it's kind of long-term goals of the Human Rights Commission that I've seen on here since my beginning with the Human Rights Commission, where these are aspirations that have gone to council or gone to the organization that haven't been approved, that we still identify as key issues that we'd like to work on. So there are a couple pieces in here that have been here for years. So the idea of this is really having a broad scope, but then making sure that things are actionable. And it's a 2-year work plan, so it's okay to be a little ambitious. But I think one of the key things is that I've seen be successful is identifying who's going to work on what items. So the homelessness and poverty work group I can speak to is like, when we have items in subcommittee meetings, we are actually bringing in the work plan items that we're talking about. Sometimes one topic encompasses 3 different items. And so we're making forward momentum on multiple work plan items because some of the issues are so intersectional. And so just really kind of viewing that as like, there are just a lot of intersectional ideas and things. So I hope that's helpful.
Yep.
But without the political will, we will not accomplish all of these, but we will ask for them. And there's a lot of buy-in to these. So let's start at the top here, and I'm wondering, a good process is us just reading through, deliberating if there's any comment, and then are you comfortable with doing edits and?
Yes, I have it open and
Beautiful.
shared so we can capture and
Just
just
type
edits
right
now,
there.
and that's the official one we have at the end of the meeting.
Okay,
Uh,
so if we want, do we want to start at the bottom to look at those the groups? And that way we can talk about the goals of each of these groups and the notes assigned to. So if we scroll to the bottom of this document, part of what we discussed is looking at consolidating the efforts that were associated with the Economic Opportunities Work Group and the Homelessness and Poverty Work Group, and actually bringing those subcommittees and volunteers together so that we have kind of combined efforts. There's a lot of overlap in the work plan items. So you'll see 3 groups down here, which is the We See You, so Whole Community United Work Group, the Homelessness and Poverty Work Group, and then an advisory group, which we have listed as existing in an ad hoc capacity. So we can start with the Whole Community United Work Group. And there were some additions to this description that kind of met the needs that were identified by our folks that are interested in working on that. So right now, Commissioner Booker Commissioner Kabuko and Commissioner Poindexter were the folks that identified interest in VCU. And so some of the language that was included was to reflect that. So I see there's some pieces crossed out. So let's just start with the pieces that are crossed out. I'm sure it's jurisdictional.
And there are two pieces here that we're recommending removing from that description. The first one is the implement word. I know it has been used in the past, but the HRC is an advisory body. So the HRC doesn't have a budget or staff to implement programs. So we recommend just keeping as the advisory role. You can research, you can propose, you can recommend to staff, but it's the staff's responsibility to implement whatever our leadership approves. So that is one that is about taking out that implement word, because technically the HRC cannot implement things. And the other, and I have to say, but has been effective in recommending things to the city. For example, our hate and bias program is started through the Human Rights Commission, and several other programs that the city has been started following recommendations by the Human Rights Commission. And in the original description, it ended here at City of Eugene on the second line. So it has been added local municipalities, educational institutions, healthcare networks, business communities, and those are outside of our area of work. We can collaborate if there is a demand, we can gather information or do research, identify ways in which the city can interact with those groups. But the HRC is a city commission. So your audience is city council and in some case, city staff. So I'll recommend removing those items from there. It doesn't prevent HRC from looking to education needs and proposing ways for the city to influence those through our intergovernmental relations and so on, but not listing that HRC can implement programs and propose solutions for our school districts, universities, and so on.
Can we put propose instead of estimate?
Yeah. So that would be identify and recommend would be something that would be in alignment with HRC roles as an advisory body. You can recommend strategies. And the other recommendation is to remove those other jurisdictions because we only have jurisdiction over the city in the city of Eugene.
So,
plus a question on neighborhoods.
yeah.
So the question there is it neighborhoods as geographical area, or were you referring to neighborhood associations?
Cool. Some of these are mine, some of these aren't. So I think looking at this, probably what we're looking to achieve, and you might be able to coach on the more semantic way of achieving this, is using whole community united as a way to be thinking about City of Eugene more comprehensively. So reading through like our strategic plan is talking about healthcare networks, educational institutions, social service networks. So I think that the idea isn't that we are liaisoning, like connecting with those institutions. Like this isn't the HRC wants to go advise Lynn County. I think this is the HRC wants to provide input to the City of Eugene on relationships with those institutions. So if there's a way that we could include and identify that these are different institutions that we want to advise on that relationship, that's probably going to achieve the function that is looking here. So is there a way to include this or to reframe this that captures that?
You could have, for example, into the City of Eugene, including the city's partnerships with, because you can propose things for the city.
Yeah. So I think that's probably, that would put it within scope, and that's really the intention.
And at the end, when we're saying including systemic and individual, I think that if you're going to list things, maybe we should say such as, because then somebody's gonna say, oh, you don't care about ageism.
Right.
So, right, if we could,
Maybe, but not limited to.
what she said.
So, okay, so we're looking at this, including City of Eugene partnerships such as, and I think what Cynthia was proposing, where we've been including systemic and individual racism.
Jackie
So,
is saying including but not limited to.
Yeah.
So
So
whichever.
further,
yeah, so down, including, but not limited to.
Oh,
Yep, there we go.
are you on our chart document?
yes, and the
Okay,
share
'cause I can
document.
help, okay?
Yeah, included but not limited.
Yeah, it's wordsmith, so,
Okay,
yeah.
So then up above, after partnerships, moves such as. It's just with,
Partnerships with local.
yeah, we're taking out that such as, yeah.
Great. Yeah, and I think that'll kind of that keys in on, and for neighborhoods, I think that the idea was, it could specifically index like neighborhood associations, but I think we're just thinking more broadly about engagement in neighborhoods.
Mhm.
So I don't know, you know, what would be more appropriate for that type of liaison.
I'd
I
say
think in this context, it matters less, right? In this context, it matters less.
you know, just try to be clear, because we have the city of Eugene, so the neighborhoods as geographic areas are part of the city of Eugene, so they are already included.
Okay,
If the idea was to propose approaches to neighborhood association, there would be a different process. So I
Okay.
just want to be clear, because they are independent organizations. They collaborate with the city, but they are independent.
okay. So if we wanted to work with a neighborhood association, would this give us jurisdiction to do so?
Yeah, because you're saying. Because of the other changes made, right?
I will just make it as neighborhood associations here that you intended to address.
I didn't
Both.
include that, I think it's both, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, but the geographical area will be input already into the city of Eugene as a part of our city limits.
okay.
Okay.
Great, that gives us an excuse to hang out with the, okay. So the homelessness and poverty work group, the objectives, haven't changed significantly. So monitor and report on laws, policies that have a disparate impact on people experiencing homelessness and poverty. Propose policy recommendations to the city of Eugene and procedure recommendations on issues related to homelessness and poverty to the city of Eugene, and engage in advocacy efforts that combat marginalization of people experiencing homelessness and poverty. And this is kind of bringing in the, both some of the goals of the homelessness and poverty work group and the economic opportunities work group. And then the advisory group, the ad hoc advisory group. So this is per the recommendation of city staff on looking at whether it be the work of like our advocacy working group, or some of these other work plan items we may collaborate on with city staff that don't need to be in a public meeting context, having the ability to maintain an introspective view of human rights issues in Eugene, as well as they arise, and develop advisory communication and recommendation to city council to respond and to support human rights in Eugene, develop and implement strategies to promote education outreach and public engagement, propose and implement ad hoc groups to actuate on work plan items and human rights issues brought by the Human Rights Commission. So provides a more broad, a way for us to address things that are brought to us. Do this on an ongoing basis or ad hoc capacity. This also supports in some of the ways that we do our public events and outreach. A lot of our pieces that the ad hoc groups do fall under that. So do these three ways of organizing work for you all? Are there any feedback or ideas on this?
One personal comment, I only intended to be on one work group.
What happened here?
What did happen?
Yeah. We just like you.
You're gonna join the CU, right?
So somebody needs to decide, somebody.
Okay, well, how about you decide? You're probably the best person for that. But what I would say kind of to this is, we might connect with some of our new commissioners too and see where your interest lies among.
That would be
these two working
helpful if we
groups.
could
Mhm.
even some things out.
Notice that too. It's like,
Yeah. So John, are you feeling on the spot?
I'm happy to volunteer where I'm needed. It looks like the homelessness and poverty work group has plenty of membership right now.
except that I've just left, maybe.
Well, if you've left, then I'm happy to join.
Thomas on the work group,
Yes.
and I'm happy to go on the VC.
All right, wonderful.
You did it. You'll even that right out.
Okay, and these are things that if you are engaged and you decide, hey, I'd like to shift, we can shift. It's not set that you have to do this, and that shuffling does happen. So this is just kind of identifying who's gonna be interested in those items and working on that. So, okay, wonderful. So anything else on these? Okay, well, let's scroll back up to the top and we'll try to get through all the work plan items. And I think the goal will just be reading through if there's any issue with any of them or one that we want to do wordsmithing on. We can do a, hey, I'd like to provide input. If not, if I read it and no one says anything in 5 seconds, I'm just gonna read the next one. And so we'll just kind of go through it in that way. So 1.1, invite different equity, civil and human rights groups to present at meetings or special events on the needs or efforts being made throughout the city quarterly.
Have a comment? Because human rights include civil, political, cultural, I would cut out the civil and.
Okay. How do you feel about that? Very open to it. So I think from city style, if removing civil, would that impede our ability to provide recommendations on anything? Okay. Right. 1.2, organize events recognizing National Homelessness Awareness Month and National Homeless Persons Memorial Day. 1.3, monitor and contribute to efforts and or policies that assist and or impact culturally marginalized communities in the city of Eugene. 1.4, promote and support human rights events and efforts in the community. 1.5, conduct outreach, interviews, or listening sessions with individuals and families experiencing homelessness and poverty in the city of Eugene.
Should that be homelessness or poverty? What did you mean? Could,
It could be, yeah.
okay,
Yeah, it could be either way. I think throughout the document, we probably use and more often, but I think it could be either or. Yeah, what would you prefer?
well, I think poor people are not always unhoused, so it depends on what you want to say.
Okay. Yeah, I would say if we want to go to or, that kind of adds a broader scope. There are quite a few people that are banned, I think, with quite a bit of money, but still getting citations in Eugene. I say that often, so I think it's a good distinction.
One question about practice, I know we don't have a budget, but is there anything we offer people that come to these to compensate them for sharing about their trauma or their?
Yeah, so there have been times in which for listening sessions, part of the budget, like the request for support that the commission. So the way that we do request for supports for everyone that comes in from other organizations, commissioners can also propose
okay.
projects. So we propose doing gift cards and things like that. Okay, where were we? 1.6. Review the status of recommendations in previous reports and recommendations proposed by the Human Rights Commission, such as 2017 Marginalized Forces Report, Persecution of the Unhoused Report, Multicultural Needs Assessment, ETC, within the context of the current state of political, economic, and societal circumstances locally, statewide, and nationally.
I just think the parentheses has to be moved to before such as.
Okay. Alright. 1.7, raise awareness for outcomes of Human Rights Commission meetings and work. 1.8, research and identify groups, organizations, boards, and commissions in the community, city, and county that have overlapping goals with the HRC work plan and goals, and provide this information to the HRC so that we can collaborate on shared goals. A lot of goals happening, right? Doesn't sound pretty, but it says what it needs to say. Unless someone has a better way of writing it. For 1.9, engage unhoused community and community groups to encourage the reporting of hate and bias incidents, elicit feedback, and document barriers to reporting.
Just a note on this one, we do have materials, if you wanna take some with you today and have those cards available, we have some here.
And this, we might also add the advisory group in that section to the right. And that's where wherever outreach events or things like that, we have materials we want to share. 1.10, engage culturally marginalized communities such as parentheses BIPOC, LGBTQ, religious minorities, and people with disabilities, and community groups in coordination with the city of Eugene to encourage the reporting of hate and or bias crimes and or incidents, elicit feedback, and document barriers to reporting.
And we do the same, such as within parentheses.
Yes, that's right.
And then for LGBTQ, probably doing QIA 2+. And to
Yeah. Just like at the end of here on this item, we usually when we are referring to groups, we tend to engage with them and ask people how they would prefer to refer to. So in our previous engagement, we went with LGBTQ+.
Mhm.
That's consulted with some of the groups we have access, so it has been like 4 or 5 years ago. So that's something that we can recheck if there is a better term that most people prefer us to use.
Yeah, I've received feedback around and it's 2S+, sorry. Making sure that is a consideration.
What?
2S, yeah, for two-spirited.
Yes.
Yeah, so if there's any feedback you receive on in coordination with the city of Eugene, monitor and contribute to efforts and or policies that assist culturally marginalized communities in Eugene, such as BIPOC, LGBTQ, and religious minorities.
Just a note on this one, because it's not capturing the track change. Instead of City of Eugene, your initial draft had the multicultural liaison. So you removed it because we cannot direct which staff will be working on this. That's the city manager's decision who will be supporting it. So wherever there was a specific staff list, we put City of Eugene.
Thank you.
Again, with the parentheses.
So, and then QIA 2+.
We're missing protected
Yes,
classes in
yeah.
there too, I think. Some other protected classes that are normally included.
Right.
Is there a reason for that?
I think it's just the way that it was written originally. I'm not sure who drafted this one.
That is coming from the WCU group, and the WCU was focused on culturally marginalized communities. So they did not include all the communities, because we had other work groups that were focused on different communities. So they were very strong about focusing on culturally marginalized groups.
So this was a carryover.
This is something that came from the WCU's previous proposals.
So do you have any thoughts on what you might want to include or amendments to this?
I don't think so.
I have a question for Melissa. Just culturally marginalized, the current way to speak about,
You can use more underrepresented.
yeah,
And underserved.
And underserved, yeah.
Most of the state policies that are direct some of our planning work, for example, they have been using underserved communities.
So maybe we can modernize a bit.
That is one work plan item just about that. To identify how do communication, so that's one of the things that we see used to focus on, was providing us advice on how to refer to certain groups.
Should we change one
Yeah.
point 1.11? Or,
What would you recommend? Do you want to change some of the language in this?
well, if people are saying, if they're describing themselves as underserved, then maybe that's the way to go.
See, go with underrepresented and underserved communities.
Yeah.
We should cover some more of the protected classes.
Yeah, and I think that there may be space like in the such as, looking there and just expanding it, like having. Probably for this and the work plan item above, it might be thinking about, something that includes more protected classes.
Some of these items are listed twice, one with some groups that are associated with VCU and others with groups that the homelessness and poverty were working on. And there was a division at the commission at the time that they did not want to mix the two groups. So there was an intent to keep those items separate. That's a carryover from that time when we had multiple items, they were listed twice. One talking about homelessness and poverty, another one talking about culturally marginalized groups.
Yeah, because 110 has culturally marginalized communities as well.
So would be the direction to replace all of those with underrepresented and underserved?
Yeah, like in 110, yeah.
Yeah, and on 111, so John, your feedback, maybe looking at removing the and in front of religious minorities, putting in and other protected groups or protected groups as identified.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay,
And Melissa 1.3 also has culturally marginalized communities if you're allowed to do that one.
you might just have to control that at the end of
Yes.
this,
Yeah.
and just try to find it. So if we have keywords that we're looking to replace, maybe we make a note of that.
I'm making a note of it in the minutes.
Perfect. Yeah, and then we can do some of that verbal hygienics work. I've noticed it with the use of homelessness instead of individuals experiencing homelessness or things like that. So, okay, we're looking at 113.
And you're missing a 112, just so you guys
Yeah,
know.
fix the numbering.
I mean,
That's the
yeah.
mystery one.
Eagle eyes
here, I
swear.
Win the margins. Okay, so engage in public events, information sessions, and outreach to educate the public about the lived experiences of individuals and families experiencing homelessness and poverty.
With a period.
Identify barriers to economic advancement and wealth creation within marginalized communities by examining current methodologies and utilizing publicly available data and resources with the goal of hosting a community event, developing programmatic recommendations or other resources for the public. Conduct outreach with the city of Eugene and the public about increasing access to basic services such as restrooms, water fountains, and I should say fountains, not foundations. I don't know if you thought that. We love a water foundation. And other public utilities in public spaces in order to provide recommendations on programs, planning, and public infrastructure. Identify barriers to housing affordability and develop strategies to prevent homelessness, reduce rent burdens, and increase home ownership. And Cynthia, we had some conversations surrounding this, and I can't remember what your recommendation was, but do we want to just put a period after home ownership?
Yeah.
Instead of identifying the groups?
Yeah.
I think that's a broad public goal. Everyone could use a home. Coordinate with other boards and commissions within the city of Eugene and other jurisdictions throughout the state of Oregon, which are centered on issues related to human rights or social progress, to plan public events or coordinated advocacy efforts. Friends in Salem will be really happy about that. We've had some wonderful outreach with Salem. Develop strategies to increase access to free hygiene and menstrual products in public spaces operated by the city of Eugene. Coordinate with, so I think it's.
I removed the
Perfect.
yes.
Coordinate with the city of Eugene to provide human rights lens on goals outlined in the city of Eugene 2023-2026 strategic plan. That pretty much allows us to do everything. There's so much there. But I think that's a really good way to respond to some of Sarah's feedback and give us some scope we can explore. Then 2, develop an ad hoc committee centered on addressing ongoing discrimination, bias, and hate crimes impacting members of the Black community residing in the city of Eugene.
And the second word is what? And it's.
It's like an ad hoc.
And.
And is Black supposed to be capitalized?
There's there we go. And that came out of Soki's recommendation, which the HRC had already approved last year. Okay, so 2.1, monitor and contribute to efforts and or policies that impact unhoused and economically marginalized communities in Eugene. Develop a strategy to increase engagement and communication with city council. The strategy will include a plan to develop relationships with individual city councilors. Identify barriers to housing affordability and strategies for ending homelessness that center on communities of color are culturally specific and or responsive, and result in the reduction of disparities in homelessness and rent burdens among people of color in the city of Eugene. Continue to advocate to recognize individuals experiencing homelessness as a protected group in all relevant domestic legal frameworks and end policies or measures that discriminate directly and or indirectly against homeless. And so here, individuals experiencing homelessness or criminalize, impose fines on or restrict individuals experiencing homelessness or other behaviors associated with being homeless.
There's a reason for that going in advisory group rather than the poverty and homeless.
That's supposed to be the homelessness and poverty work group as well. Yeah, so we'll want to put. And that advisory piece might help us with some of our liaison efforts as well. Okay, identify barriers to housing affordability and strategies for ending homelessness that center on LGBTQIA 2+ or 2S plus communities are culturally specific and or responsive, would result in the reduction of disparities in homelessness and rent burden among people of LGBTQIA 2+ communities in the city of Eugene. I'm gonna get tongue twisted by the end of this work time.
Just a question about the one, now the numbers are confused. 2 now, I guess, if we could go, was 2-4 basically identical?
Yeah.
And they're both with the homelessness and poverty work group. So can we combine them
So, what were the two? It was,
with people of color and or, right? You see what I mean? Do one item.
I pulled out my notes because there was one that they wanted to consolidate in the meeting, but it wasn't this one, so,
Okay, so there's more, good.
yeah.
So Fabio, did that work?
Yes, this 2.5 is just calling out LGBTQIA2S class groups, but the goal is the same of identifying what can be done to protect communities or people who are experiencing homelessness.
So how
Yeah.
do people feel about putting these together and specifying people of color and LGBTQIA?
Yeah, I think combining them works. I think where this came from was there was nothing talking about homelessness for the LGBTQIA 2S population. And so this was added in the last work plan to make sure we were thinking specifically about those groups. So I think if we consolidated them and, looked and said, we're looking at both of these populations, pairing them, I think does make sense because those are also two of our highest frequency of gay bias incidents. And so that intersection has a really strong interplay.
And there are intersections between the two groups.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Kabuko is trying to say something.
Oh.
Maybe.
I agree on the overlap in some areas, but I also agree that, sorry, babies in my lap. I also agree that, having them as separate items might be beneficial because it would allow us to focus on each of them individually, not grouped together. If that makes sense, since each group would probably like to have a little bit more advocacy on their part individually, not lumped as one.
Yeah, just for background, from staff's perspective, it doesn't change our interaction with the commission. That has happened in the past. When we had two very identical items, one assigned to the WCU group, another one assigned to a different group, just because we're focusing on different communities.
I just have a question. I just noticed that there was some switching between unhoused and homeless. And I was wondering if there had been a conversation about deciding whether we were gonna use houselessness or homelessness or the unhoused rate.
Yeah, I think we have typically folks in a homelessness and poverty work group are seeing individuals like who are experiencing homelessness. Unhoused is the way that the protected group is identified in city code. So there's in some of these, it's looking to expand that city code with that distinct language. And then other framings are more of the colloquial duration. So that's kind of where that derived from. Yeah. But I don't think that we've made a distinct decision on which framing that we as a commission are using. Yeah, so looking at.
Sorry, did we decide if they would be combined or not?
So I think that's what we were just about to address. So I originally broke these up into two items. I'd like to keep them as two items, if that's possible.
Okay.
Yeah. That was
I
fine.
agree. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Kuko. Okay, so we're 2.6, collaborate directly with leadership of other boards and commission to create a more comprehensive approach to advising the city of Eugene. Coordinate to propose new protected groups currently not included in the city of Eugene Human Rights Code. Provide recommendations to increase programmatic resources and awareness for individuals fleeing domestic violence, human trafficking, and other forms of violence. Coordinate with City of Eugene to conduct outreach, research legislative models for city council, and propose ideas for a new composition of council, including a council position representing indigenous communities who once resided in the California League. Okay. 3.1, In complement with, section 3 of Council Resolution 5274 dated July 24, 2019, a resolution condemning white nationalism and alt-right activities and groups, and in conjunction with existing city efforts, conduct research and engage the Eugene community in identifying place and major street names, etc., in Eugene that honor or glorify white supremacy, that honor white supremacy.
Oh,
Need to
that's a
delete one.
repeat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a repeat. I'm just reading as is, if we hear it out loud, it helps us. So I think, yeah, deleting that. Okay. Let's go. Identify needs to support long-term economic success of populations who experience systemic economic disadvantages in business creation, access to traditional capital and wealth creation. Yeah, sorry, I'm scrolling between pages here. Evaluate current economic development incentives, grants, tax breaks, technical assistance, and other supports through the lens of racial justice and provide recommendations for modifications if appropriate. Create additional frameworks for reviewing personnel performance within the Office of Equity and Community Engagement that provide input from public and members of the Human Rights Commission.
So that's when I flagged because that's not within the scope of the HRC. The Human Rights Commission doesn't have any influence on the performance of current employees. And the council doesn't either. So this falls within the sole purview of the city manager to set policies under which we all work related to that.
So I think the intention of this was to look at ways of providing feedback or input. Are there any mechanisms that the HRC could be involved in?
I think, normally that would just be a conversation between, myself and the group. And, we could talk about your suggestions. I don't see that being a work plan item. It's not anything council would ever weigh in on because that's such a hard line for them. And so I can't imagine. I just don't think it's a work plan item.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone have any thoughts there? There's a lot of conversation about this at the last meeting. Okay. 3.5, research what other cities are doing regarding citywide programs to address systemic inequity, identify what works and doesn't work, and identify best practices. Keep track of current and proposed efforts within the city of Eugene to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay. Provide recommendations on city communications, including the city website, social media, etc., as it relates to culturally marginalized communities, BIPOC, LGBTQ, and religious minorities and people with disabilities.
Just a note on this one, this is the item I mentioned before that relates to how we address some communities. So in the past, we have brought that discussion to the commission to help us in outreach and find the best way to refer to different groups.
So again, we have the marginalized word.
Yeah, I'm flagging all the different.
Yeah.
Oh, you already got it, she's got it.
We'll replace all culturally marginalized with underrepresented and underserved communities.
Okay. Initiate the formation of a naming committee or task force that conducts research and engages the Eugene community in identifying place names and monuments, etc., in Eugene that glorify white supremacy. Prepare a report on the results for HRC and city council with recommendations for place names to be considered for renaming and monuments, etc., to be considered for removal or replacement.
That's different from 3.1.
I was going to mention that there is looks like a repeat of 3.1. But this one has the second piece which was separated in a different row, probably by formatting. Which when we were reading, it looked like it was supposed to be combined, but that was the intent initially, that they would do the research and present a report to council. So this one is more comprehensive than 3.1. 3.1 stops with the research. And 3. Now would be 3.6 goes beyond and includes a report with recommendations for change. But 3.1 refers to the
A specific-
resolution which the HRC recommended and council approved. So you can discuss how you want to combine them. And
I feel like they should be combined.
the Commissioner Tabuco is asking to speak.
Commissioner Bucco?
Apologies, you can finish this conversation. I wanted to go back to 3.4 whenever you're done.
So looking at the combination here, I think consolidating is always good. So if there's a way to consolidate that into 3.1, it's worthwhile.
One proposal would be for staff to take the piece about the report and bring it into 3.1. I believe that will satisfy your intent. Yeah.
Commissioner Tabuco?
Apologies if this was stated already. It's really close to bedtime. For 3.4 that was removed, in regards to that, I know that it's been mentioned that like commissioners are or can be involved in the hiring of staff, or like when staff is reviewed for hire or job openings, however that should be phrased. And if some of the stuff that we're working on is a proposal to council, is there a reason why we couldn't be involved in some of these, the feedbacks of staff, especially the ones that we engage with the most? I think that is something that is important for what we're doing, and especially if we are connecting with certain liaisons to the city or to council, being able to have some kind of input should, I feel like it should be available when personnel are being reviewed.
Yeah, I
Obviously,
understand.
obviously in our last meeting, we had a lot of the commissioners had a lot of things to say about the termination of Dre. And so again, like a lot of the commissioners only had positive things. So being involved in some sort of process or piece of the hiring process, but then not necessarily being able to give any feedback on personnel, I don't think it doesn't track. It doesn't have the same, I don't know, ability across the entire thing.
Yeah, I think I understand your point. The HRC is always has the ability to provide feedback about any staff. When it comes to our recruitment process, we have specific policies and regulations in place. That's one piece. And when it comes to the evaluation of staff performance, there are city policies that apply across the entire organization and multiple bargaining units and groups. We can't establish a policy specifically for one group of employees. We evaluate performance across the organization in the same way. But again, the commission is always welcome to provide feedback about staff. That's always an option. Weighing in on a performance evaluation is not.
So Commissioner Kabuko, do you have ideas for editing this or amendments that you want to make that might fit within the scope that Mia is discussing?
Not necessarily. If it's something that is said to not be possible, then I don't think there is any editing. I just don't feel very comfortable with, hey, you're allowed to weigh in on hiring this person, but we will take your feedback and that's all it is. It's not going to be weighed in on any performance reviews or anything like that. because we do work with staff in some cases closely, and we do have staff that come to our meetings every month or to our committee groups and groups, and it's just, it doesn't quite sit right with me for our feedback to basically just be a comment box feedback or like a comment box note. That's like, okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in the input of the commission. And so if the piece is weighing on personnel performance, I think a more standardized method of delivering feedback might be something that accomplishes the goal that's articulated here. You know, people that serve on a public body might not be comfortable talking to you, you know, and expressing things, but standardized feedback mechanisms such as surveys or forums might be a more accessible manner for someone to deliver information to, you know, the city of Eugene. So this could be something that is looking even more broadly from just the Office of Equity and Community Engagement. But it could be saying, hey, we're looking at the human resources being of, you know, the city of Eugene, or the way that personnel are engaging with public boards and commissions, and we're trying to create more access to providing input or more access to that space. So if the piece is specifically around the human resources specific language, maybe there are amendments that we could propose that are looking to say, like, instead of reviewing personnel performance, satisfaction, engagement, like maybe it's just saying we want to explore a broader mechanism for input.
I do like that idea, Blake. Thank you. You always articulate my thoughts a little more clearly than I do. But just having something a little bit more formal and on record that could be referred to when someone is being reviewed for their performance. And this could be across all city employees where it's some kind of form that could be submitted, and what is the word for, like, filed away, essentially.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever gonna be in connection to performance. You know, I did run this by the city attorney. This was a very firm line.
Mhm.
And I can't imagine that feedback is always accepted and everything we create is a public record. So we have record of all of it, right? And certainly there are many, many data points that inform performance. And that can be feedback we receive is always a part of how we coach and help employees be better and show up in ways that are most beneficial to serving all of you. But in terms of a formal role related to performance evaluation, we can try. I don't think it's gonna fall within our legal parameters to allow for that.
Okay. So, yeah, I don't know if we look at this, so creating additional frameworks for reviewing personnel performance, what would be another way of looking at this schema that we could articulate? Providing, like, exploring ways to provide feedback on engagement with City of Eugene staff. You know, supporting public boards and commissions.
Some kind of standardized feedback.
So let's just make it more broad, and then if it's something that we suggest and it's outside of the scope of the legal frameworks or personnel practices, then we can work through iterations. So looking at 3.4,
That's a quick question. I know when I've helped, I work with certain city colleagues closely, and their supervisors would contact me and help provide some feedback. Is it generally the practice of the city to also ask, like, the liaisons who they liaise with for that 360? Okay,
Yeah.
just curious if it was.
I mean, obviously, feedback from people you work with is one data point in performance review, right? There's a technical component, you know, a component around following city direction, policy compliance. So that's why it's, yeah, there's a lot. Gotcha.
so I'm looking at something that gives us space to explore this, and this is within the advisory group, so this could be, you know, that more ad hoc capacity. I think a lot more conversation to be around it. So creating additional frameworks for providing input on engagement with City of Eugene staff, supporting boards and public boards and commissions.
Propose, perhaps.
I think you used a word that makes sense, and that's explore.
Yeah,
Explore additional feedback mechanisms.
yeah.
Yeah.
So explore and propose. Okay.
Commissioner can do that. Can I offer just a thing of process, just perhaps it helps the commission understand the processes we have, because if we would have something related to evaluation. The commission only interacts with staff on an unlimited capacity, so we have a position that has about 30% of the time dedicated to the commission. So if the commission is proposing like one evaluation and the city is taking action that are different from that, like what would be the mechanisms in place to help you understand that what your experience may not be representative of everything else that we are considering. And by law, we cannot go into details about why we make some employment decisions. So that's a protection for the employees. And that's something that we could not overcome through a recommendation by the commission.
So I'm thinking back to her training. I don't recall specifics about human resources policy being addressed to, I mean, it's not within our scope, really. Is it possible, or do you think necessary to include a short portion in board training on city human resources policy, what is in or out of scope for us?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think understanding it as an organization, like the function, because so much of the equity work does fall within the scope of human resources, especially when we start talking about recruiting people to engage in public government and outreach. I think that's really valuable. Yeah, that's a good idea.
We'll know that.
And also participating in the hiring process is a way to understand some of those processes, because as part of the job of helping a search committee is appending a briefing on how we do hiring, what we have to consider, and you can see the process of how we select people to serve in this office.
So I sent over, from what I typed, I put it in the chat for the meeting, just so it was somewhere you could copy and paste more easily. And if there's amendments you need to make, feel free to do so.
Would the commission ever consider a resolution or something like that with an accommodation to a particular staff member? That would be a method of feedback that obviously it's not what we're talking about here necessarily, but does that make sense, the question?
So if someone requested input.
No, or if someone's service was exemplary, would the Human Rights Commission ever consider a resolution recognizing that exemplary work? And could that be a method of
Providing that, so
feedback?
addressing it publicly as a feedback mechanism.
No, yeah, I don't know. Is that something, I'm guessing that's not something that's been done before.
I mean, I think that there are avenues to explore with that. You know, I've even thought about us like thinking about employee appreciation awards and like certificates of appreciation for, you know, exemplary service for like staff liaisons or folks that we work with. So I think that there's mechanisms for doing that. But I think something like a resolution or a draft statement of acknowledgement could be really beneficial.
I think that for this one, we really need to tie it back into why. Why do we want it to be a work plan item? And is it that we are looking at, you know, kind of like Commissioner Kupo said, when HRC members are brought in for, say, a hiring panel, but then we're not able to provide feedback later on, are we looking at reducing bias throughout the entire longevity of a staff member? And so I think we have to have, it can't just be, this is what we want to do. We need to tie it back to why is this a priority for us?
Chair, process question, we are at time.
I know.
No.
So we're deciding-
Mhm. So I would say if we think this item gives us the scope, I think these are really good conversations for that. And I think in the future, really a goal that I think we could have as a commission is being more on the same page, you know? And I think like what Mayor Venus, talked to us about, like this idea of like, we don't want to produce division, we want to collaborate. I think that our experience that we expressed at our last meeting showed that there is some gap in communication that caused a lot of harm that we need to address and figure out how do we bridge that gap and how we feel that we're participating meaningfully. And so earlier engagement in that process, I think could be really beneficial. And I think there's just a lot of really also amazing things that city staff do for us that I'd like to be able to be like, hey, thank you. And like, I want your supervisor, or I want somewhere on your employee file, like I want this to be in there. And to be like, hey, I had a really wonderful day doing outreach work with Melissa, and like, oh my gosh, she's so amazing at working with this population of people. Like, I want someone to be able to see that. And I think that to not have that lens could be really detrimental to, that full scope. And so I think it would be like, I'm a supervisor of people and I would want that feedback on my staff. But then to be able to decide how I interact with that data for different types of human resources decision is important. So I think a lot of conversation, but as Fabio noted, is we only have so much time to spend with each other tonight. And we've got 6 more items to go through.
Blake, can I
so-
make one more comment? Sorry. I appreciate all the like extra comments and in support of figuring out a way to make our voices heard as well. And for me, the past 2 meetings have been a bit tainted by this issue, and I think it definitely leaves a bad taste in my mouth when it comes to working with this commission, and that's really unfortunate because this is not the fight that I wanted to be fighting when it comes to figuring out who I feel comfortable working with and who I am supposed to be working with when it comes to city employees. Otherwise, please continue. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Kubico. So looking at this, if we want to get through this tonight, which I think would be the goal, we do have to motion for an extension. And I think we give ourselves a very firm extension to 8 p.m. And that gives us enough time to go through this and then just cover the pieces at the end.
So moved.
Okay, so that's a second.
Okay.
And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Glad we like spending time with each other. Sorry to hold you a little later. Okay, so let's look at, I believe we were on 3.9.
That's the new 3.7.
Oh gosh, that's gonna mess me up.
Over there,
Okay,
monitoring.
I'm gonna have to look up there. You're gonna have me so lost. Okay, monitor and contribute to efforts and the policies that impact unhoused and economically marginalized communities in Eugene. Review trainings, policies, and procedures provided to City of Eugene staff and departments who engage with or make decisions impacting individuals and families experiencing homelessness and poverty, and provide recommendation for areas of improvement. Identify and advocate for strategies that prevent at-risk renters and homeowners from entering into homelessness. Assess city-funded programs and initiatives directed towards individuals and families experiencing homelessness based on a human rights score and other qualitative metrics. Review and make recommendations on personnel practices and financial costs associated with camp clearance and citations issued to individuals and families experiencing homelessness and poverty in the city of Eugene, and prepare a report for public dissemination.
So that's another one that I flagged as being outside of the HRC scope. This reads as an audit, and there is, the HRC doesn't have any audit authority
Okay,
of either personnel practices or financial finances.
so this is 3.11 up here. Yeah.
The top
Okay.
one.
So this one was approved by city council in our last work plan for 2 years.
Okay,
So I just want to make a note of that. If it was outside
Yeah.
scope, we've been doing it, but we haven't produced a public report.
yeah,
So I believe that's something that you'll want to review and figure out how that was approved maybe last round, or what types of amendments we need to make to put it within scope.
yeah. So when this comes to council, they assume that everything in it is within the scope.
Okay,
Honestly, I don't know why this one wasn't caught before.
Okay.
This is another one that I reviewed with the city attorney.
okay. So let's go, Bobby, if you can click back, I can see it. All kinds of tabs.
Yeah.
Okay, so looking at this, make recommendations on personal practices and financial costs associated with camp clearance and citations issued individuals. So which parts are out of scope?
So this is basically an audit of personnel practices and financial costs associated with camp clearances. And that is the piece that falls outside of the scope of the HRC. There is no auditory function referenced in the code.
Okay.
And then so I wasn't clear on the goal of this one. And just to be clear, normally staff would intercept this, and I don't know who reviewed this with you last time, but.
Yeah. So when we're looking at this, Commissioner Law, I think your hand was up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think from what we've worked off of this work plan item before, it's not looking at exact personnel practices or the financial scope. It's what is the impact of practices that have occurred and the financial cost burden to those who are experiencing homelessness in the
Okay.
city. So I think
Okay.
it's more the impact and not the city practice itself.
That makes a lot more sense. Okay, got it. Okay,
Yeah, and so I think that, I hope that provides some clarity, is that this really is looking at that piece. So within that framing, is there something that we need to do to shape the language so that it meets, it's interpreted correctly?
well, knowing that we need to keep moving, I wonder if everyone would be comfortable with me working with you to update that, so that.
Perfect.
Okay.
That's great. Yeah, it's an interesting intersection there.
Yeah, that lens that's very helpful.
I just want to confirm for notes, 3.11.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, in this new version, when it gets so lost. Okay, review and make recommendations on disaster response plans for individuals and families experiencing homelessness and poverty who are impacted by natural disaster, hazardous weather events, and changing climate. Promote the use of guidelines from the United Nations Special Rapporteurs Guidelines for the implementation of the right to adequate housing. Explore and provide proposals and alternative procedures for dealing with minor offenses of individuals and families experiencing homelessness to reduce the imposition of criminal penalties for sitting, sleeping, lying outside on public property and public ways, or in other places not meant for human habitation when adequate shelter or alternatives cannot be obtained.
So that was another one that I had flagged. For a number of reasons. You want me to delve into that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Sure.
okay, so we do have alternative programs. I don't know if you all are familiar with community court, but that is, pretty robust alternative program. That's just a note. The next piece is that we don't actually impose criminal penalties. We do cite and fine, which is legally very different than criminal penalties. The other piece is that this is implying that alternatives would be developed for one population and not another. And constitutionally, we can't apply the law differently to different groups.
So when we're looking at this, so I think we are focusing on one specific group. And policy associated with their experience of the city of Eugene. So looking at criminal penalties, so I think that kind of conversation is around minor misdemeanors for public camping, trespassing, and things that are associated with that experience of homelessness, park rule violations. So what would be a way of changing that language to encompass those types of offenses that are putting people eligible for the community court program or municipal court?
Well, so this is a little bit confusing because it does say criminal penalties for specific things. Sitting, sleeping, or lying outside in public property, which those are not criminal charges, right? You're never gonna see somebody with a criminal charge that involves one of those activities.
So changing it to like, looking at like citations or penalties. Would that be language? So outside of getting rid of the word criminal?
Yeah, potentially. The other awkward thing about all of this is that this falls within the purview of the municipal court judge. Council doesn't tell him how and when to, impose various levels of the law. That's his job, right? So that, it's awkward for that reason too. I think I understand what you're getting at, and I honestly had read, a work plan item up above that I thought sort of captured the idea of that. I'd have to find it, but it was a really broad one around policies impacting people who are experiencing homelessness, and I don't remember which one. So can you again tell me what is it you're hoping to do? Because
Yes.
around misdemeanors and all that, that is the judge's job. We can't, council can't tell them,
Yeah, so they can't tell them how to rule, but they do write the legislation, the policy. So council gets to decide what things sit and constitute as minor misdemeanors. And
in municipal code. Well, see, some of it isn't in municipal code.
yeah,
So they're gonna be limited by that. That's,
yeah,
We just took out a lot of language and just said explore. And provide proposals for alternate. Procedures for dealing with the penalties related to homelessness.
yeah. So simplifying. Yeah, I think that that's probably it, because there's a
Yeah.
lot here. And I think there's the two pieces that we're looking at and where this came from, and I can kind of just remember when this work plan item was written, because this was on a pre-existing work plan, so this is a rollover. So this, I think finding a way to simplify it, but still achieve the goal. I think what the spirit of this is, if there's an unhoused person that's sleeping outside and they're given a citation, or they're given a notice for prohibited camping or park rule violations. There's a school of thought that says that that's not humanistic, that's outside of the scope of human rights. And although we do have a court system, community court, municipal court, all these resources that help people navigate those minor misdemeanors. And there are all alternatives in place. I think the school of thought is that that shouldn't be a citation or an issue in the first place.
Right.
That ever gets someone interacting with the criminal justice system.
Right.
And that idea of identifying when there's not an alternative shelter, like an alternative option, is saying like, is it really right to give someone a citation?
Right.
If they can't get up from where they're camping and go access a bed somewhere, because it's 11 PM and intakes are closed.
right.
And so I think that's kind of the fundamental core of this. So if we need to kind of wordsmith this might be good to rope in, I think we've been thinking about this, you getting involved in the homelessness and poverty work group. Maybe we can follow up and try to find a way to hit the spirit of this, make sure that it is included.
I think we're really trying to advise on dignity and the right to housing.
Yeah.
Right, that's
Yeah.
where we've been trying to go.
Yeah.
So that we don't have time to rewrite it, but
Yeah.
that's where we're going.
So I think, let's put this, so just a note, let's follow up and let's find some language that fits within scope, but
Yeah.
achieves that same goal.
Make a motion to extend to 8:15.
Jackie, we're gonna have to. we can do this.
This could be for too long.
Yeah, it's always hard. Fabio called this too. It's not really hard. So, okay, anyone a second?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay. The city manager is okay with it. Okay, so 3.16, review and make recommendations on policies and procedures used to monitor number of beds available at emergency shelters or adequate alternatives during camp clearance. I see there's a note here. There's a,
You know, that's
No.
what they're about.
oh, that's one above. Okay. Yeah, we just want folks to use the shelter finder tool. It's great.
I apologize, I should have asked, are there impacts to premium pay or personnel related to support staff staying later than 8 o'clock? Does that question make sense?
You can answer that,
That is very thoughtful.
yeah.
And everyone here is a non-represented employee and therefore salaried. Thank you for asking.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Pretty flex.
When we pop by on a summer, whenever these folks are, it's like their 8th event of the day. Just like, oh, give them a hug. Yeah. Okay, so we are at 3.17. Okay, coordinate with City of Eugene to produce publicly available resources, maps, catalogs, resource cards, web content, etc. Demonstrating where individuals experiencing unsheltered homelessness may legally reside overnight. Review and make recommendations for right to and monitoring of adequate housing and emergency shelter programs by examining qualities such as security of tenure, availability of services, affordability, habitability, accessibility, location, and cultural adequacy. Just so everyone knows, it's UN language. But there's so many. Review trainings, policies, and procedures provided to City of Eugene staff and departments to engage with or make decisions impacting individuals experiencing individuals.
Individuals or families.
Individuals or families experiencing,
Mental health.
oh, I think we're getting rid of experiencing and impacted by mental illness and mental health crisis and provide recommendations for areas of improvement. And this is actually a homelessness and poverty and VCU. This is thinking more broadly about supporting individuals with disabilities. And review and make recommendations for the allocation of resources towards staff and training dedicated to direct service, crisis intervention, behavioral health within city funded programs and initiatives, serving individuals and families experiencing homelessness. And that was a derivative of a recommendation from Chief Skinner. Yeah, so
That was the last one.
great. Okay, we've done it. So only a few items to follow up on that we need to go through. So if you two, what is the next step in this process? That's the best way to do this.
Yeah, I think so. By code, the city manager has to review the work plan before it goes to city council. I will work on a council date when, you and Thomas can visit and present the work plan. But in the meantime, we do need to figure out how and when Sarah will have the opportunity to review it.
Okay.
But we can talk about that.
Okay. So is there any approval process we need to do tonight?
Yeah, I was going to ask that because we need a vote on the draft that the commission is sending.
Ah.
So one alternative would be for the commission to approve as is with that note that those two items may be worked on language that I reviewed when it's reviewed by city manager, for example, because by code, the city manager has to review the entire work plan.
Does as is leave room for like punctuation, things that need to be still changed? And some of that wording of making sure it's all the same.
We capture that note that including that we're replacing marginalized with underserved and underrepresented, and also homeless with people experiencing homelessness. So that will be made throughout.
Yeah, I would suggest that you could approve the plan with the edits discussed and reflected in the notes. And with the understanding that the chair will finalize items X and X. And I don't remember which numbers they were, but if you are comfortable with Blake finalizing those, then.
I make that motion.
Motion.
Okay. That's what she said. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, 3.11 and 3.14 would be the items for other work.
Okay, so let's put the motion on the table that we are approving as is with the recommendations for verbal hygienics or grammatical pieces and some specific wordsmithing. With the idea that 3.11 and 3.14 will be reviewed by the chair in coordination with City of Eugene staff in preparation for the city manager. Can I get a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? And Commissioner Kabuko, I think a hand went up, but it's hiding.
Apologies, no, my hand was not up. Or if it's supposed to be up saying I approve this, then yes.
Wonderful, it's up, okay. Thank you. So that is wonderful. Thank you all. That was an enjoyable process, actually. Thanks for staying a little later. So, our last pieces on here are liaison assignments, OEC updates. I think that those can be held via email.
Yes, yes, in the past, liaison assignments was part of the work plan because it included an assignment to the police commission. But per code, the police commission liaison has a different process. We already went through that in June. So Commissioner Booker has been assigned. So all the other liaisons are informal liaisons that HRC can just tell us which groups you'd like to liaise with. And then staff can coordinate your participation. So that doesn't require council approval.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I just want to make one quick note, which is that yesterday at the 5:30 council work session, the October 14th work session, there was a 90-minute presentation on the city's role in behavioral health in combination with a county representative who also presented on that. Super informative, and I think all of you would be interested in that if you want to go back and listen. And then there are two more, we called that a workshop, council's request, and there are two more workshops coming up in the coming weeks following that line. So there will be a presentation on youth specifically related to behavioral health. And then a panel made up of Chief Skinner, Chief Caven, and Municipal Court Judge Gill. So
Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. So looking at this, our pieces for folks who are identified in the working groups, I would say connecting, coordinating with staff. The folks that identified interest in WeCU, let's try to organize and talk about how that process of organizing and doing meetings would look. And then for the homelessness and poverty work group, us doing some planning for the memorial event in a similar capacity that we did while we're in this planning and approval phase. And I think we should be in a good position moving forward.
Procedures, all meetings of the WCU and the homelessness work group are public meetings, so we have to schedule and post them and staff them and prepare minutes. So if you'd like to meet, please indicate your availability. Temporarily, Melissa will be supporting the groups until we hire someone for the human rights and equity analyst position. That hiring process is happening right now. We are reviewing applications for the minimum qualifications and the initial step. Then third step in the process is panel interviews. So we have two groups that interview candidates. One includes community members. We usually have 3 people from the HRC participating, plus other community members that we invite, some from partner organizations and neighborhood associations as well, and a panel with staff. So I have 2 commissioners who would like to participate. One is confirmed, the one is tentative. If anyone else is interested in participating and learning about that process, we are expecting to schedule interviews in 2 weeks. Okay. So please let me know if you have interest in participating. And because we're out of time, I will send updates with the follow-up message to this meeting. We have several updates from the office, but I'll give that in writing.
Okay. Okay. Has anyone been identified for public comment in the chat function? Okay. So that's our meeting, y'all. Thanks for being here. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, let's call it a day. Thank y'all. Thanks for being here.
Also, this FAD